I'm a big, big bookworm, and I never used to be until after I had children, actually. So I thought, maybe I should put up some of the books that I've been reading this summer. So this is my summer reading list. Now, I don't own physical books. The ones I do own are actually my husband's books, and he doesn't own a lot. You can actually see them behind me. Those are his books. The only book I have in physical form that you will find is the one I'm reading right now to my children that I've had for a few years. So I'll just start with this. I'm in the middle of this, so I don't know how it ends or anything yet. But this is a middle grade book. It's called Wish Tree. This is by the author that did The One and Only Bob and those books. I love her books. They're great. So I was like, ooh, she wrote this other book. This is about, it's narrated by this tree. And a lot of people put their wishes on it, but there is stuff about racism in this book, so it will teach children how to be kind to all people, no matter who they are. And I think it's got some important lessons in it. So far, so good. So this is the only physical book that I have right now. I'll just keep it here. So that is something that I've been reading. Otherwise, you'll find me reading on my tablet through the Kindle app that I have. And this is how I've been reading books lately, like crazy, especially since I'm nursing my baby, who you might hear in the background once in a while because he's just hanging out right next to me. This is my list since the start of the summer. It is now around the halfway point of summer. And a lot of people don't realize that because summer, it goes through September. So this is going to be the first half of this book list. And then I'll do another one of these towards the end of the summer. First off, you have The Someday Birds. This is another middle grade book. I like to read a variety of different genre. This one is about an autistic boy who makes a list of birds that he wants to see in the summer with his father, but his father gets sick. He goes on a trip with his siblings with a woman who is a refugee from the Bosnian War from the mid-90s, the early 90s to mid-90s. It was a very good book. I really enjoyed it a lot. It was the first book that I read during the summer. This is called Afloat, a memoir. This book is about a woman who lives on a houseboat. She talks about the relationships that she has with people while living on this and how it kind of changed a lot of her life. And it opened her up to explain how she was sexually abused at one point. So it's got some heavy stuff in it. Definitely for adults only. This is so good though. He's going to help me out. I didn't even think I was going to like it. I was like, okay, well, I love the idea of living on a houseboat. I watch a lot of videos about people that transform their houseboats, and I find it fascinating. I would love to live on a houseboat. So I was like, let me read this. A Moonless, Starless Sky. This is another kind of heavy book. It's about people that have been survivors of genocide, just various things that have happened in Africa and survival stories. The woman who wrote it is a journalist from America. Actually, I think she was born in Uganda. She mentions it, and she goes back to Uganda at one point, and her parents don't understand that because they left there. But she talks a little bit about her own story, but for the most part, she talks about lots of other women and men's stories and some histories. It was very good. It wasn't the best book that I read this summer, but I had this on my to-read list for a few years, and I'm really glad I got to read it. If you don't know anything about child soldiers or human trafficking, this might shock you a bit to read, but it's definitely so good. Beverly Lewis. This is Abram's Daughters series. I think that's what it's called. Listen, I've been nursing this baby in the middle of the night. And so when I nurse, I read because this is like bright in the middle of the night. And so I get to read. And I had this whole entire series for several years on my Kindle app, and I completely ignored it. So probably like 6 to 10 years I've had it on my Kindle. And I was like, I think I should probably read this. I read the entire thing very quickly. Some of these books I read in a whole day. I was sucked into it. So this is a bad series to read if you just had a baby. And I literally read this right when I had my baby. I started reading it in the hospital. And it's very sad when you're an emotional, hormonal woman that just gave birth. Definitely don't do it like I did it, because there is some heavy stuff about babies in it being born. There's some sad stuff in here. This is about a group of sisters who are Amish, their love stories, and also their stories between their love for each other and their family. And it was so good. I'm really glad I read it. I was, like I said, sucked into this. If you don't like Amish romance stories, then just skip this part. But I loved it. I enjoy these type of books, but it's been a while since I've read them. It sounded better in my head. The author, I have to just say, I know this is going to be kind of weird, but I think it sounded better in their head than it did on paper. This was not that great, and I'm going to tell you why. This main character, she has such a low self-image of herself, and they do mention that much later in the book. She makes fun of herself a lot throughout it, and I don't appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sure teenage girls like make fun of themselves a lot, but it was depressing. I don't think it's a good message to give out there. She talks about how she had lots of acne on her back and on her face when she was younger. What this whole book is about is it's a group of 3 friends. 2 of them start dating. They're best friends, 3 best friends. One's a boy and 2 are girls. And 2 of them start dating. And the main character, she always thought that maybe she would be the one that would date the guy. But at the same time, he has this older brother that she didn't really get to know in the past, but now she's getting paid attention to by him. And they're on a family vacation with his family. And so they get to know each other a little bit better. Now, the brother, he is an amazing character throughout it. He is the only honest person. He is very good at communicating. It's something that I always mention about in books, that I wish people could properly communicate with each other. And he does that. So that's the only part that I really liked about this book. Otherwise, it wasn't well written and I couldn't follow it that well. I read it quickly, but just to kind of get it done with. I think that this is one you could skip, but if you're interested in it, go for it. Simply Sustainable, moving toward plastic-free, low-waste living. I loved this book. I am someone who lives simply, and a sustainable lifestyle is what I love to do. This is about how you could become pretty much low waste. But low waste, I think, is really good, especially in the way people in our time live right now with so much plastic everywhere. The author gives so many great examples of ways that you could cut things down slowly, even recipes of cleaners that you could make. And I really enjoyed that she covered so many different variety of topics for low waste. It's very informational, though, just so you know. Summer of a Thousand Pies. This is another middle grade book. This is a book about a young girl. She's been homeless with her father, just like living out of cars, doing her best to survive. Her father has some situation that he's been going through, which causes her to have to live with her mother's sister. Her mother is no longer alive, but her sister, she had never met, but heard about her mom's sister. Her aunt owns a pie shop. She learns about baking, and they even have some of the recipes at the end of the book of some of the things they make, but it's about her learning how to trust people and to learn about who she is and what she enjoys doing. And she loves baking. So definitely what the point of it is, that she is to make 1,000 pies. And that becomes her goal. I love making goals. It was a cute book. If you are an Agatha Christie fan, I don't know if you'll like this book or not. This is the 5th book out of the Hercule Poirot. How do I say his name? There's a whole series where there's like 46 books or something like that. I know it's weird because it says the big 4, but it's the 5th book. Basically, this is some man shows up in front of him and drops dead, and he has a paper marked with 4s all over it, just like 444. And so now he has to find out the mystery of who killed this man and what is the whole idea of this 4. I started to get into it because I love Agatha Christie's books. They're mystery books. If you are not familiar, she wrote books way back in the early 1900s. But This one, I'm not giving it away, but the ending was terrible. And I really was like, what? It's such a disappointment, but maybe you'll like it. The Lido. I had this on my to-read list for like 4 or 5 years. I was like, I think I should read it. Whenever it came out is when I had heard about it and I found an interest in it. I am so glad I read it. This was one of the best books I read this summer. The Lido is about a woman who is a reporter, and she has to do some sort of story on this one pool area, and the place is called the Lido. It's in Great Britain, and she comes across this old woman, and the old woman, you learn her story over time and how important the Lido is to her, and she's been swimming in it for her whole life, basically, and she's in her late 80s in this book. And they form a friendship and a bond. And it's a beautiful thing to read about, to see an older woman and a younger woman make connections with each other over this pool. And just, I love swimming. This is the perfect summer book because I love swimming. It's a beautiful story. It's got romance because the older woman talks about her love of her life, what has to do with the Lido and why she's so connected to it. We Are Displaced by Malala Yousafzai. I read her book, I Am Malala, as well as her children's book that she had. This came up in the summer reading list for my son Micah, who's going into his freshman year of high school. He chose out of a list of books that he wanted to read this. I was like, ooh, I should read this too. So we both finished this book. We both were reading at the same time. It's about refugees, and it talks about from the perspective of different females in different places around the world and how they got through their situation, and they each tell a little bit of their story. It's not a long book at all, but I think it taught some good lessons to my son about what a refugee is. He had already known a bit, but I think just learning further was very important. 24 Eyes was written in the 50s in Japan. And it's post-World War II. What you get throughout this is that there's a teacher who has 12 students. That's why they have 24 eyes. And throughout it, you get to learn a little bit about the students and the teacher and their connection that they make. But she is anti-war throughout the whole book, but can't really express it. So you learn about it over time. It was really cute. It was sad. It had a lot of things in it that I would say this book could be read by older teens, because it does talk a little bit about what happened to one of her students. And I don't really think a kid should be reading that. There's nothing bad in it. It talks about how war can really cause issues for families and individuals around those people. Unearthing the Secret Garden. This was really cool to me. It was not like amazing, but Frances Hodgson Burnett is the person that wrote A Little Princess and The Secret Garden. Secret Garden is one of my favorite books. This is one of the only books I've reread a couple times. Therefore, in reading Unearthing the Secret Garden, I actually learned about the author for the first time. I never knew anything about Frances Hodgson Burnett. You get to learn about the plants that she liked, what her life was like, and how her garden in her own life had an effect on her writing the book. You get pictures. I'd never seen what she looked like or anything. It was really nice. If you like learning about authors and if you enjoyed The Secret Garden, definitely read this. And because of that, I also am reading the Secret Garden Devotional. I've been reading through this. If you're someone that believes in God or wants to just have some sort of inspirational encouragement, then you could read this per day. I'm also reading right now, which I am not done with yet. I am more than halfway through it, but it's very informational. I love cycling. Would love to ride my bike everywhere if I could, but it's not feasible where I live. It's kind of dangerous. And he talks about that in the book, but this covers a lot of stuff, like everything you could think of about the dangers and the safety issues and what is pros and cons of biking instead of having a car. Just so many different aspects throughout it. I really like learning some of it, but some of it is just like, and it's not even a long book. It just feels long, but it's not bad. And I'm also reading the rest of the story by Sarah Dessen. I've read a few of her books before in the past, but it's been quite a few years. I was like, I need to have a nice summer romance, like a teen romance story. I had a teen romance that led to marriage. I like those because I can really connect to them. It's about a girl who her mother had died when she was young. It's been 5 years, and she goes to visit her mom's family, and she hadn't seen them in a long time. And she meets all her cousins, and she meets their friends and people. So it's about her finding romance, but also finding a connection with her family that she missed out on, and learning more about her mom because her mom didn't open up about certain things. And it's cute so far. I will probably finish this within a day or two. That's my list as of now. Like I said, I read a lot, so there's going to be a lot more. And I have other books that I'm going to read. I have some planned out. If there's a book that you recommend to me that's maybe very summary, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll read it, and maybe it will show up in my next list. Thanks, guys.